but it shows us just how valuable it can be to add a serving of something like super nutrient dense, right?
What is the Nutrivore score?
The Nutrivore score is a calculation of nutrient density. So since the early 2000s, nutrient density has been scientifically defined as nutrients per calorie. So the Nutrivore score is a way of measuring how much different vitamins and minerals and protein and fiber and heart healthy fats I get for the energy that that serving of food is going to give me. So the Nutrivore score is a really robust way to measure nutrient density. There are 33 nutrients that go into the calculation, including vitamins, minerals, protein, fiber, really health promoting fats, but also classes of phytonutrients, as well as some really cool vitamin-like compounds, non-proteinogenic amino acids. So amino acids other than the 20 that our body uses to make proteins, but that are still like really important amino acids. So 33 nutrients go into this calculation. Basically, every nutrient that I have enough data that it makes sense to include in the math. And that gives us this big picture number, right? So this nutrients per calorie, total nutrients per calorie measurement. So the number itself is not normalized. So there's no cap. So it just is like the highest value is just the highest value. So they actually range from 0 to 14,744. But if you want like a rough guide, any food with a Nutrivore score over 150 is a food that is contributing more nutrients than energy to our overall diet. Now, that doesn't mean that under 150 is a bad food. So we are not using the Nutrivore score to moralize foods. This is not a way of saying here's the cutoff and above this it's good and below this it's bad. And actually, I would say the Nutrivore score is math that shows us the opposite. So the Nutrivore score database, so like all of the foods that I have calculated Nutrivore scores for thus far, is nearly 8,000 foods. And if you just like sort them, right? So you just look at a 227 page table that has all of those foods in it, and all of the different Nutrivore scores, you see really quickly it's impossible to create a line, right? So even this line of 150, it's not really a great line because there's nutrient dense whole foods that are below, like have Nutrivore scores under 150, and they're still incredibly health promoting, valuable sources of nutrition. They happen to also be more energy dense, which is why the math works out the way the math works out. But so even thinking about it in terms of a food that's giving you more nutrition than energy, that's still not a line that we want to be saying, above which is good and below which is bad. You really quickly see that all foods lie on a spectrum, and there's value to the whole part of the spectrum. We just want to understand the relative value, right? How much of this food to eat versus this food. And so the Nutrivore score can help us do that. So there's 3 ways to use the Nutrivore score. I'll end with my favorite. But one is to use the Nutrivore score to identify simple swaps. So something that would play the same role in your meal. So maybe swapping out a dinner roll for a baked potato. That's about double the nutrient density. Or swapping out that baked potato for a baked sweet potato, you're nearly doubling the nutrient density again. Or swapping out that baked sweet potato for some butternut squash, that's like 50% more nutrient dense, right? So it can show us those like easy things that I can swap, but that food is still going to play the same role in my meal. So it's going to be, overall like the same, right? That's going to be my starchy component of my meal. It's going to work great with my, roasted chicken and my, delicious garden salad or whatever the rest of that meal is. So it can help show us those simple swaps that can help us get more nutrition from our meal. Caveat, that doesn't mean never choose the dinner roll. Remember that dietary diversity is a really important feature of a health promoting diet. And so we still want to mix it up. Even when we're doing these swaps, we still want to be thinking about ways to just eat different foods and have dietary diversity. So that does mean sometimes choosing the dinner roll, sometimes choosing the butternut squash, sometimes choosing the sweet potato, and sometimes choosing the baked potato. all of those can have a role in an overall healthy diet, but then maybe we're going to swap something else out on our plate for that higher nutrient density food, right? So it gives us that, like really like simplified way of going, okay, I've got this highly related food. What's something I can swap that's going to get me more nutrition? The second way to use the Nutrivore score is additions. What is a thing that I can add to my plate that is going to give me a lot of like nutrition bang for my actual bite buck, right? So my one of my favorite examples is if you take a jar of store-bought marinara sauce and add just garlic and fresh basil. You can increase the Nutrivore score of that sauce from about 500 to about 700. If you want to add some sliced mushrooms as well, you're going to increase that Nutrivore score from about 500 to, depending on what mushrooms you chose and how much you added, to 1,000 or more. And so it shows us the value of adding, vegetables and herbs are like our top targets with this strategy, but it shows us just how valuable it can be to add a serving of something like super nutrient dense, right? Add a side salad, add some steamed broccoli, or add some chopped chives, right? Or a sprinkle of parsley. Those things actually do add up to a meaningful nutrition contribution. And then the third way to use the Nutrivore score, and my personal favorite, is the redemption arcs. It's the foods that have a reputation of being like nutritionally pointless that actually have valuable nutrition. My favorite example of this is iceberg lettuce. So iceberg lettuce has a Nutrivore score of 700 and change. It's actually a slightly more nutrient dense than cucumber or celery or artichoke. Now, that doesn't mean cucumber or celery or artichoke are bad, but it just shows you like iceberg lettuce is right in the mix. It's way more nutrient dense than what most people think, right? Most people think it's the nutritional equivalent of cardboard or that it's crunchy water, right? Like most people don't view iceberg lettuce as a nutritionally valuable vegetable, but when you actually crunch the numbers, you do the math, you objectively see that yes, it is. Other types of lettuce, if you like other types of lettuce, do have more nutrient density. So other types of lettuce are double, triple, quadruple the nutrient density, but we're starting with something already amazing, right? So if iceberg lettuce is the only lettuce you like, you're making a great choice. It's also more affordable. It's easier to find. You might be able to get it at, a Dollar General or a Dollar Tree, in the middle of a rural area. It's going to last a lot longer in your fridge, right? So it's still a really nutritionally valuable food. So that's my favorite way to use the Nutrivore score, is to help get over some of our biases and food fears by looking at the actual math, right? The actual just calculation of the objective nutrient density of foods. Now, all that being said, here's not how to use the Nutrivore score. We already talked about not using it to moralize foods, but we're also not going to use it to gamify our diets, right? So if I am swapping out a food with a Nutrivore score of 400 for a food with a Nutrivore score of 405, that is not a meaningful difference, right? That is, right? We're talking like less than a 1% difference, right? This is not a difference in nutrients that I'm going to get out of that tiny little difference in the math that's going to mean anything for the quality of my diet or my overall health. I am not going to get in the weeds about which way of preparing spinach makes it the more nutrient dense. If it's boiled with salt or boiled without salt, if it's boiled from frozen, if it's fresh, right? I'm not going to be fussing about these tiny differences. In the end, however I like spinach so that I will eat it, that's the best way to eat that spinach, right? So we don't want to use the Nutrivore score for gamification. And we don't want to only look at the Nutrivore score. So I think nutrient density is a fascinating lens through which to view food. And I love that we can do that objectively thanks to the Nutrivore score. But there's some things the Nutrivore score can't tell us. So it can't tell us what nutrients are in that food. And it can't tell us the nutrients per serving, not unless you do some math. So it can't tell us how that food contributes to my overall diet. So we want to combine the fascinating insight that the Nutrivore score gives us with other really important information to inform our food choices. I would suggest other important information would be what food group or food family does this food belong to, right? Is this a cruciferous vegetable? Is this a seafood? Is this a pulse type legume or a seed, right? These other things that'll tell us what types of nutrients that food contains. What part of my meal is this food, right? So is this my starchy food, my protein food? Is this my fruits and vegetables, right? So that type of information helps tell us what type of nutrients I'm getting from this food. And then we also want to consider how this food is contributing to my overall diet. So am I falling short on omega-3s? Yes, that means that even though this food might have a lower Nutrivore score, adding some seafood actually, it's a terrible example because it has typically really high nutrient densities, really high Nutrivore scores. But maybe I'll add some plant omega-3s, right? Some flax or some chia seed or some hemp seed or some walnuts, right? Like it is this other piece of information that's really important, that I need to choose this food regardless of the Nutrivore score because it's filling an important nutritional gap. So the Nutrivore score is one piece of information that we want to use in our food choices, but not the only piece of information. And then the last caveat here is numbers are fun. I love numbers. The math girly. But diet culture has had us focus on numbers in a really unhelpful, restrictive, I would say toxic way for a long time. So if you have ever counted calories, counted carb grams or fat grams, maybe you're counting protein, right? Sometimes when you have that background of counting in a way that is stressful, there actually are studies that show that counting calories does increase the stress response as well as perceived stress. So if counting is stressful, if a number is stressful, if you see that number and you just feel yourself sliding it, that slippery slope into, yeah, but this thing has 405 instead of 400. So I should choose this thing with 405, right? Or you find that you're always choosing the highest number and forgetting that important dietary diversity piece, right? If you find that the number is triggering unhealthy behaviors when it comes to food choice, this number is not for you. So the other thing that I have done with Nutrivore is create a lot of different tools for implementing the Nutrivore dietary philosophy, which is just the goal of getting all of the nutrients our bodies need from the foods we eat. So I've created lots of different ways of accomplishing this goal that can cater to wherever you're starting from. So if you are getting most of your meals through a drive-through and we are going to start with just trying to figure out some ways to add some vegetables, like I've got resources for that. If you have been working really hard on a high quality diet for a long time, I've got resources for how to tweak for that, right? So, and every person in between. And the Nutrivore score is part of my development process for these resources, but it's not something you need on the flip side to use these resources. So other things that I have for you, the Nutrivore meal map, you can find that in my book, Nutrivore, or you can sign up for my free weekly newsletter, which is awesome, like bite-sized bits of information about nutrients and health promoting foods, and it always includes a recipe. One of the welcome guides that I give you is the Nutrivore meal maps. That's another way to get that. The Nutrivore Weekly Serving Matrix is also in my book or available as a digital resource on my website, nutrivore.com. I have serving suggestions for all of the Nutrivore foundational foods. You can get those listed on my website. You can find those in my book. You can get them as part of the welcome guides when you sign up for my weekly newsletter. So all of these are like different depending on your starting point. A different resource is going to be the best one for you to use right now, but there are different ways of implementing the Nutrivore philosophy that don't need you to worry about the Nutrivore score. So I love this math. I think it's fascinating. I've learned so much in doing these calculations, but I also want to honor right out of the gate that not every tool works for every person, and that's okay. I've created lots of other tools to help you implement the Nutrivore dietary philosophy.